Hello, and welcome to Live with Marketers, our award-winning LinkedIn Live broadcast series featuring industry trends, best practices, and forward-thinking views on the marketing landscape. Brought to you by some of the brightest minds in B2B marketing. My name is Caitlin Belay, and I lead partner marketing for LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, and I am delighted to be here with you today, broadcasting from a chilly and hopefully not rainy Oakland, California. I want to thank everyone for joining in today for ABM, or account-based marketing, is alive and well. And that's a very strong statement, but we're confident about that here at LinkedIn. A recent LinkedIn survey of over 800 B2B marketers tell us that over 54% of you are already utilizing ABM as part of your strategies and tactics, which is very exciting. And that leading into the new year, 80% of you are looking to increase those investments. So those conversation and insights are perfectly timely. And we've got a great lineup here for you today. So I would like to introduce our fellow speakers for today's session. We have with us Jason Widup, VP of Marketing at Metadata.io, and my friend Emily Anthony, Senior Director of Media Solutions at B2B Merkle DWA. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.
Hey, Kate, thanks for having us.
Very glad to be here.
Absolutely. And so as we get started, I'd like our audience just to learn a little bit more about the both of you. Would you both mind sharing a few sentences about your background in account-based marketing and one fun fact about yourselves that our members can't see on your LinkedIn profile? Anthony, or Emily Anthony, is it all right if we start with you?
Sure. Emily Anthony, I lead Merkle B2B's media capability from our San Francisco office. And I actually didn't start my career in B2B marketing. I've slowly migrated that direction over the course of my 7-year tenure with Merkle, and now am involved with some of our largest global B2B tech clients. And so for those who don't know, Merkle is a customer experience agency. And that means from a media standpoint, the work that we do is audience-led, highly data-driven, looking to build personalized experiences from a media planning and activation standpoint. So personally, I find some of the most exciting and challenging opportunities to be in the B2B space with our B2B clients. And ABM is a great example of that. One thing that you might not be able to figure out about me from my LinkedIn profile is despite the fact that I have lived at sea level or very close to sea level my entire life, I have hiked a 14er. So that's a mountain that exceeds 14,000 feet in elevation. I did it once in Colorado, made it to the top, and I don't know that I'll do it again, but it was a good experience.
That's quite bold. And Jason, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks. Jason Widup, VP of Marketing at Metadata.io. Let's see, my background is pretty long. I've been in marketing for, I don't really want to say it, but just a little bit over 20 years now, primarily in B2B marketing. I started out in analytics back when analytics was just kind of really coming into light in marketing. And since then, I've run pretty large marketing operations teams at places like Tableau, Workfront, Getty Images, and yeah, my experience with ABM, I'd say, is fairly broad. Primarily from a measurement standpoint, but from a strategy standpoint as well. I mean, we've all been doing ABM and B2B marketing forever, pretty much. And so, if you're a B2B marketer, you're probably doing some flavor of ABM. Let's see, the one fact that's not on my LinkedIn profile. I was trained as an explosives expert during my time in the Marine Corps, so that was interesting and not on my profile.
Well, I'll make sure not to get on your bad side. It's very nice to meet you. Thanks so much, Emily and Jason. So now that you know a little bit about us, we'd like to know a little bit about you, our audience attending today. So let's fire up that poll. So for those of you tuning in on LinkedIn Live, you can find the link to Slido there, or you can include or just generate your answer right within the Slido console for the event session today. And the answers look something like this. If you could please pull up that Slido poll for us, our media productions team. What our poll is basically asking you today is that how would you rate your ABM strategy? And first, the top of the answer is we don't know, but we are considering one. And that's great. We'll be covering lots of content for you today, and follows with we are beginners, we are intermediate, and we are advanced. So we'd love to hear a little bit about where you would rate your ABM strategy today. And we're going to give you a little bit of time to percolate your answers within our Slido console. So while we're doing that, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items for today. First, we'll be having a short, or rather 10-minute Q&A portion at the end of this session. So if you do have questions for myself, for Jason, for Emily, please submit those questions either via the comments tab in LinkedIn Live or via the Slido comments section. And we'll make sure to get to as many of those questions as possible. I'm sure you all know 10 minutes can go super fast when the conversation is going fast and serious. Also, I want to let you know that we with LinkedIn Live and Live with Marketers feel that feedback is the greatest gift that you could give us. We have an opportunity for you to offer feedback to us via our Slido component. So highly recommend you send us thoughts about how today is going for you and how we can continue to improve. So thank you so much for that. So with that, I would love to take it back to those poll survey responses and just curious to see what kind of results we're getting. And quite honestly, it looks like we're split across the board. We've got 25% of you considering account-based marketing, but also a strong 12% coming in with advanced strategies and tactics. And I am delighted to say that we have a lineup of conversation that should fit everyone within that gamut. So excited to have you walk away with actionable tips, tricks, and strategies for your ABM strategies and tactics. So with that, I think the best way to start our conversation today is level 7ing on account-based marketing, or the definition of account-based marketing. So we pulled up that definition on the screen right now for the audience. The way that we are defining account-based marketing for the purpose of our solution today, our conversation today, is account-based marketing is a growth strategy in which marketing and sales at B2B organizations work together to create relevant buying experiences for high-value accounts. So want to just take a pin in your mind, take a look at that definition, but want to use this time to break it down with Jason and Emily. And Jason, I'm curious to hear your take. One of the words in that definition that really called to me is the word strategy. Why is it, do you think, that account-based marketing is a strategy?
Well, it's interesting. I think, these words, strategy, tactic, program, it depends on your context, right? They can mean the same thing to some people. They can mean different things. And so I actually personally like to think of ABM a little bit more simply than this, maybe. So, the way I think of it, it's around the notion that like businesses are selling to other businesses. And so the focus should be on the account and not just the account, but the accounts that matter, and just not so much on an individual, And so I think we've complicated it a little bit along the way by adding technology platforms. ABM is not a technology. We've added frameworks, but there's not yet been I would say, a fully agreed upon framework that everybody uses, kind of like a serious decisions funnel, for example. And it's a thing that you do, as businesses selling to other businesses. And, I did a little research for a podcast I did a while back on ABM. And it's funny because ABM actually has ties back to the early 1900s and the Pareto principle, which we all know better as like the 80-20 rule. And so back in the early 1900s, businesses were like this notion of, hey, 80% of your outcomes come from 20% of your inputs. And so when people started to think about that principle, and as it applied to businesses and marketing and selling to other businesses, that's really where it started. It's like, we need to spend 20% of our efforts to get 80% of the output. And so really that's 20% of the accounts, it really started there. And then it really kind of kept going on. And then it wasn't until I think the earlier mid 90s that the term ABM was actually first used. And it was used by the IT Sales and Marketing Association. And they used it to describe basically how to do a complex sale in IT software, right? So the 90s was this time like Siebel and all these like big software packages were starting to come out, no code, but like incredible implementation, and, kind of long sales cycles. And they needed a way to sell this thing that wasn't like at an individual. They had to take people through an entire experience and like get them to understand demand. So I said a lot there, but that's really kind of how I think about ABM when it comes to strategy.
That's a great, and I'm so glad you were able to kind of dig deep into that word within the definition. Where I would be curious to get your thoughts, Emily, are on these two keywords around relevancy and high value. And I think those are two additional keywords that are worth digging in on. How would you explain what a relevant experience is? And then how do you think about high value accounts?
Sure. And I think in a way that's a build off of Jason's comment, right? That ABM is businesses marketing to businesses, and you aren't just trying to reach an individual. But I think the evolution of ABM in the last few years is that you can get a lot more specific with your ABM strategies and tactics. We use the word stratactics sometimes. Is it a strategy or a tactic? It could be both. But how do you personalize that message, right? Not just to an account, but a buying committee within that business, and maybe even specific individuals that we know have perhaps more influence over the purchasing decision. Each of those folks will have kind of a different element that's most important, right? Is it cost savings? Is it functionality? Is it features? And you have to know and understand who you're reaching within the account to have the most effective and highest ROI ABM approach possible. In terms of high value, I think that can vary quite a bit as well. There's kind of a basic definition. What accounts will generate the highest return, right? Which have kind of the highest revenue potential tied to them. But there are other ways that we're talking to our clients about value, right? So they might have existing accounts, clients, where there's an upsell or cross-sell opportunity in a new space that's important for their brand and their business. As they're evolving, as we're seeing many B2B marketers do during this time, there's a lot of transformation and disruption happening in the space.
Excellent. And so when I think about the level of experience we have between you two as guests today, I really think about the evolution of account-based marketing. And for me, and I'd be curious to know if you agree, really kind of falls into three categories, which is the technology that's changed, the insights and information that we have available to us, and also the people. Marketing and sales alignment is a key part of account-based marketing. Where for you has been the greatest driver in evolving account-based marketing, or perhaps a combination of the two? Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, so my answer is probably going to be more of the operator's answer, right? And so given my background and experience with analytics, it's the amount of data that's available to help you run an ABM program has really just increased dramatically. And I feel like that's one of the biggest, I guess, changes that we've seen over time. And so, one of the core tenets of ABM is for your target account list to be basically defined to be as close as possible to ready to buy, or the companies, for whatever reason, not just their demographic and firmographic and technographic stuff, but intent-based, other reasons to buy. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't even intent data. Like, it wasn't even really a thing. we didn't have some of this data that now is more readily available for us to build our lists from and to start from. And so, so I think that's really one of the biggest differences, is just kind of the availability of the data and our ability to make sense of that data in a way that then we can apply it to our campaigns. And so kind of what Emily was saying around the personalization piece, we go from personalizing at a department level, let's say, to further down, personalizing at department and job title level. And so as time has gone on, it's like the marketer's job is just as hard or harder, because the expectation for us is that we're going to get tighter and closer to that actual person, committee, buyer who's really ready to pull the trigger. But we can't do that without some additional data and technologies to help us. And so, really when I see it, that's, I think, one of the biggest shifts that has allowed ABM to become more of a table stakes, for B2B marketing organizations. But it also has allowed ABM as a strategy, tactic, program, whatever we want to call it, to be able to produce higher and higher amounts of ROI, because we can get tighter. We're not wasting one of the biggest tenets of ABM is you're not wasting advertising dollars and marketing dollars on accounts that might look like they fit your ICP, but are just really far away and really not ready to buy.
So you used an acronym there. And for those of you who are not familiar with that acronym, what is ICP?
Yes. What is it? No, it's ideal customer profile. And so this is basically like the traditional way of looking at your ICP is to look at data that's readily available. What industry are the companies in that you sell best to? What are the job titles of the buyers that you sell most efficiently to? Back to the company, how many number of employees, what their annual revenue is, and what locations they're in. So that's your basic, I'd call the most basic ICP possible. And when you look at all the customers you've sold to, you analyze all of that closed won data to figure out like what that is instead of guessing. And so, but guessing is a great starting point. Don't get me wrong. Like guessing in like when you're sitting down with sales and you're having to come up with that initial ICP, that's totally fine too. Once you got a lot of deals in Salesforce or in your CRM, then you can actually start to analyze it and get a more, algorithmic based look at who your ICP is.
Fantastic. And I know, Emily, you have very much expertise in ABM, but a very different point of view and background based on the organizations that you've worked for. What do you really see as the driving factor? Is it technology? Is it people? Is it data insights? Or is it something else?
Yeah, I think technology and data definitely come to mind. I was reflecting on this, and I think one of the biggest things that's changed from a advertiser standpoint, right, media planning and buying, is the shift from things being relatively manual to automated. And Jason touched on that. But I think back to some of the earliest campaigns that I worked on, and we were doing manual lead scoring, right? We were doing manual statistical analysis of different account cohorts, trying to identify, how do we group different elements of our media campaigns, whether that's audience targeting and social and display, or keyword sets within search, and actually sitting down, with statisticians in our organization to figure out how to do that and kind of talk it through and build out our media strategy. Now, of course, that is all machine learning, AI driven for the most part. That's the goal for our campaigns. And there's still a challenge with that, right? To make sure that you've got the right measurement in place to understand the decisions that the engines are making, and we can communicate that back out in terms of insights. But that has been, from the earliest days to now, I think one of the biggest shifts that we've seen.
Excellent. And I realize that we made quite a bold claim when we say ABM is alive and well in this session title. But I also know that our organizations are all very data-backed and lead with data-driven decisions and principles. What are you seeing right now that would validate that link ABM is alive and well? And maybe Emily, you could start here.
Sure. Fully support the claim, I guess, to make that statement and back it up. Over 90% of our clients are leveraging ABM strategies. So surprised actually by some of the numbers, Kate, that you shared. We see it as a key part of a B2B marketing strategy. And I think there have been different conversations around some of the elements of building ABM segments and lists, right? So if IP targeting is an element, is accuracy or relevancy of that going down right now with folks working from home? But there are so many other ways of kind of building and identifying an account list that we haven't seen a slowdown there, and we haven't seen results or ROI abate. In some cases, given the environment right now, we're seeing a prioritization of ABM in specific accounts and specific verticals.
At Metadata.io, Jason, are you seeing some interesting data, or perhaps it's a gut feel? What are you seeing?
I actually was able to pull some data. So for those of you that don't know, at Metadata, our platform runs like thousands of campaigns for our customers across pretty standard ABM channels, programmatic, LinkedIn, Facebook. And so I looked at the last 4 months, and we've seen our clients increase monthly spend on ABM campaigns by about 12% alone. And so some of this is related to improving performance. So they start to do an ABM program, they see improving performance, and then they put more money into it. So some of that on our end is going to be from the lift that they're getting by running these programs efficiently, but also there's a lot of companies that are just transitioning more of their efforts to ABM. So we see people that are doing like kind of straight up demand generation efforts and then some ABM programs, and we're starting to see some money shift more, from demand generation programs over to ABM as companies start to see positive performance and ROI. And I'd say, the caveat to that is, I wouldn't say so we're saying, yeah, people are increasing their money, increasing their spend. We're seeing, and sometimes in fact, we see CPLs go up a little bit, cost per lead go up a little bit, because the quality is higher, you know what I mean? And so like the conversion rate downstream is better. But even given all of these metrics of saying like, hey, you should be doing ABM, little ribbon of caution, don't just like throw away everything that you're doing and jump right into it, And so I'm sure we'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but I think it's an important point to note that there's a lot of positives to ABM, but just like pretty much anything else you do in marketing, you want to kind of dip your toe in and you want to get it right first before you A, go all in, and B, judge it for its long-term value to your organization.
Are there specific qualities about ABM that makes it particularly successful right now in your mind? Jason, maybe you can pick that up first.
I think a couple things. I mean, one, if you do ABM right, you are personalizing nearly every interaction with the buyer committee, potential buyer, prospect, et cetera. And so I think that the benefit of doing it is that the folks that will get your campaigns, your ads, et cetera, it will be more relevant to them. And so by being more relevant early on, there's a psychological component to it where the ad doesn't have to work as hard as an ad that's served to somebody that doesn't have as much relevance. And so I think you just it's kind of like piggybacking qualities when you do ABM. It's not just that you're targeting the right people, but now because you're targeting the right people, your ads and the campaigns can actually change a little bit to move, to continue to move them forward in that funnel. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's the result for receivers, like all of us are receivers of this stuff as well, is just that like, hopefully I won't see that many ads where I'm like, what the heck is this? You know what I mean? Like, what are they trying to sell me? Like, it's so irrelevant that they just got it so wrong. So hopefully like the ads that we see, the campaigns we're a part of, will actually be somewhat beneficial, helpful to us. They'll actually give us a little bit of information we didn't know that we can use in our jobs without buying the platform, And so I think that there's a lot of these little nuanced, interesting artifacts, that happen with ABM that actually make it a better approach than, straight up just spray and pray.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a great transition to the next question, which is around investments. And you mentioned ads being particularly compelling right now. Emily, what are you seeing in terms of the investments that are shifting in the account-based, orchestration, strategy, technology, people, data set, insights? What are you seeing those investments being right now?
Sure. From an advertising paid media standpoint, definitely a shift to digital. I think that's probably not a surprising insight. I think one thing that we haven't touched on is maybe just the diversity of activation that you can do with ABM. Right? It's not just list targeting. We talk a lot about the role of ABM to drive acceleration from a sales pipeline perspective, but it's not the exclusive way to use ABM, right? We can leverage ABM to monitor key accounts. We can use ABM to look at trending content, trending topics, and that can inform a variety of different marketing efforts. And of course, Jason mentioned surge and intent data. I think that is one of the key things that we do, but there's a diversity there that I think a lot of our clients are looking at right now as they try to understand, where does it make sense to invest? Where are we seeing the market go at the moment, and how can we make sure that our advertising is tailored to that appropriately?
Jason, what's the one ABM investment that you'll be making, or at least your top one if you make many?
Yeah, I mean, outside of my own platform, I like direct mail again, and so that's an area that I'm dabbling in. Some of the direct mail platforms out there now do address verification, right? Because at the starting of quarantine, we didn't want to send a bunch of really expensive direct mailers to company addresses and it never land in somebody's hands. And so now, maybe a month, 6 weeks into quarantine, they released the ability to do address verification. So now you can kind of send them an email, get them warmed up, ask them to verify their address. You never see it. In fact, the company that's managing it will never see it either. It's kind of stored off to the side. And you can do some interesting things there, right? So really now we have no more in-person events, right? And so it's us all trying to vie to get people's in-person attention. I still want their one-on-one, even if it has to be virtual. And so it's really about how can I push through? And, we can try and push through with ads that are compelling and that might get some FOMO going, or it might just be the most interesting way I can describe my platform in 3 sentences. But the chances of that pushing through versus something completely different, another thing that I seem to be known for is conversation ads, just trying different things to get in front of, and this isn't a LinkedIn commercial, I promise, but conversation ads are amazing. And I've used them for 6 months and I continue to use them because they're just a great channel. So I think, when we're talking about this, there's a lot of noise, especially if you're a marketer. I can't ever say this, a marketer marketing to marketers like I am. It's really hard. I'm competing with 8,000 other tools that are trying to get in front of the exact same people. And so for me, I'm also outbounding now. I do outbounding myself, for marketing. And so because it's hey, and very personalized. And so that's really, and what's interesting now is when we're trying to figure out how much time to spend on things. Because obviously me doing outbound, a very personalized video outbound to each person, is going to take a lot of time, but is that conversion rate 50%? Whereas on digital, it might be 1%, and so it's an interesting math problem to try and figure out where to put your time.
Excellent. Well, it's time to segue to the next portion of our content. But before we do, I want to make 2 reminders. One, we have the opportunity to give feedback. If you like what you're hearing from today, and I hope you do, please let us know. If we can be improving, also send us that information. We will be using all your feedback to improve future Live with Marketers sessions. Also, I'd love to remind you that because we are halfway through, that we'll be taking questions at the last 10 minutes of today's session. So if you have any burning questions, now would be the time to submit them, because we hope we can get to as many as possible. So in preference for this next session, I asked Emily and Jason to do a bit of a risk for us and maybe some arts and crafts from home. The next series of questions are designed to be yes, no questions. So this will provide Emily and Jason an opportunity to at the same time reveal yes or no to the answer to the question, and then we will debate it live. So Emily and Jason, if you could give us a sense about the signs that you have, with love and care, created from your very own homes, if you could raise those now just to give a sense for our audience what that will look like. Well, hello. So we've got a yes and we've got a no. So for example, we'll ask a question and we'll say, is today Thursday? And the answer will be, if we reveal it in 1, 2, 3, the answer is, raise your sign. No. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to jump into this series of questions. It's intended to be a lot of fun. A lot of these questions are designed with not necessarily a predetermined or specific answer we're looking for, hoping to spark a little fun and debate. So Emily, Jason, your signs are ready? Let's rock and roll. And the first question is account-based marketing the same thing as as B2B marketing? So is account-based marketing the same thing as B2B marketing? On the reveal, 1, 2, 3. Similarities here. Okay. Love to hear, Emily, what you have to say about that. Why is it not the same thing?
Sure. So while the majority of our clients do some form of ABM, it is not the exclusive strategy or tactic, I think, for any of our clients. When you look at, I think particularly the top of the funnel, right, brand building, and some of the media tactics that we leverage there, right, some, ABM targeting just isn't available. But that doesn't mean, right, that B2B clients shouldn't be doing something like TV advertising or sponsorships. That's definitely a key part of an upper funnel strategy. And then there are forms of demand gen that aren't necessarily ABM targeted as well.
Fantastic. All right, ready for our next question? So the question is, do you need a clear, predefined list of accounts to do account-based marketing? And the reveal should be in 3, 2, 1. Oh, I see a yes and a no. So I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah. So I said yes. So here's my reasoning. I'd love to say no or maybe, or it depends, right? But I'll say yes because mine is mainly working from a bottoms up analysis. So if I want to make sure that I can actually I have a finite budget, and I want to make sure I can give every account in my list the experience that I want to give them. And that's usually not serving half of an ad to somebody. And so for me to really understand what I can do with my budget, do that bottoms up analysis, what do I need to spend per account basically to give them that experience, and then that, when I pair that with my budget, it means that I'm going to have a certain number of accounts that I'm going to market to. So that's my main reasoning.
Value per perspective. Emily, what can you rebut that statement with?
Sure. So this is definitely an agency answer, I would say, but it's very common for our clients to come to us and say, we're not sure who from our account list we should target, or which accounts within our account list make the most sense for our campaign. And that's something that we can help with the support of technology and partners and providers like LinkedIn and others. So we can help define it, right? If somebody's not exactly sure how to get started with a list or how to build a list, there are definitely tools and resources available to help advertisers that are getting into ABM for the first time.
Fabulous. I love both valuable perspectives. Thank you so much. All right, ready for the next one? It is, should account-based marketers stop measuring leads? And let's reveal this answer in 3, 2, 1. All right. It sounds like we're reached a swap it up. All right. I like it. The fast change. All right. So we're going to need to address both of this. Emily, why don't you go first? Why should they stop measuring leads?
Sure. So I think this is a qualified answer. Leads should and can be a part of a measurement framework, but it shouldn't be the exclusive way to measure an ABM program. Looking at lead quality definitely has a place, but when we look at ROI, and ultimately, the direction that we advise a lot of brands to go, which is looking at lifetime value, really on top of a direct ROI. Looking exclusively at leads doesn't give you the full picture of the value of your investment in ABM.
Jason, a rebuttal here?
No rebuttal. I agree 100% with what Emily says, but here's why. So, and I think we agree, because it should definitely not be the core, like it shouldn't be like your core KPI. You should not be gold on leads. You should be gold on, as a marketer, gold on revenue, to be completely honest. And so that said, though, it all starts with a lead. I actually hate the word lead. I hate the word lead. We might as well call them email addresses, because that's what most marketers call leads. I mean, it's really just an email address and they're calling it a lead. To me, a lead, it's a lead. Like if we looked up the real like the Merriam-Webster definition of a lead, it's like there's some reason why a salesperson should be reaching out to that person, and not because they read an ebook. You know what I mean? And so I think getting away from leads as a primary measure is super important, but we're going to still have to measure them. So yeah, I agree with Emily 100%. Like I would actually rather say yes to that, but I think they still need to be measured, but it should definitely not be like one of your core primary KPIs, I'd say.
Right. So now I get the switching on the yes or no. I appreciate that perspective, and I hope our audience appreciates that perspective as well. The next question, are we ready? And this is it possible to be successful with account-based marketing with an organic or inbound marketing strategy? Are you ready with your answers in 3, 2, 1? Love it. Love the great debate. All right, here we go. Jason, why don't you give us your thoughts on this one?
Sure. So I guess a part of it is how we define organic inbound strategy, right? So the way I think about it is not spending money. So I'll approach it from the not spending money standpoint. So how do you do an ABM strategy without spending any money? So because like you're really trying to figure out your target accounts, and you're basically creating audiences in these platforms and these marketplaces to advertise to them. How do you do it without it? It's a big part of my strategy because I don't have a ton of money as a startup. And so one of the things that I do, it's maybe a little bit easier for me. I'm a marketer selling to marketers again, but I connect with people that are in my target account list in LinkedIn and other places, but mainly LinkedIn. I connect with them on LinkedIn because I'm putting out a lot of content on LinkedIn. I do videos, I do posts, I'm self-deprecating. I'm just trying to get some content out there. And I don't pitch slap them right away, right? So I don't connect with them and then immediately buy metadata. What I want is I want them to connect with me. I want them to start to see some of the content that I'm putting out there. Maybe at some point they'll mosey over to my website because they like what I said, or maybe they have to go over there to read a blog. And then maybe they'll mosey around the website and try and figure out what I do. So I do think now it's a much longer tail process. It's much more like outbounding, than it is maybe like in a true ABM approach. But from a pure, and this is more acquisition, obviously, one thing I wanted to mention is you're not done at closed won. And so as I like to say, when I used to have a team, now it's me and a buddy, but you're not done at closed won, and so you get that deal in, and that's just like half the battle, right? And so ABM is a longer, it's a broader approach than just acquisition. So something to, kind of pinpoint there. But I do think you can serve a lot of the acquisition components of ABM organically.
Fantastic. Emily, I'm so excited to get your perspective here. What are your thoughts?
This is actually a build on Jason's response. So where my brain immediately went is that kind of life cycle and stage of a business is critical. Not only to paid media mix and acquisition, but also thinking about, what is the right balance of, organic paid owned earned. So I think you get to a point, right, critical mass, where you do have to invest in paid to kind of drive awareness and volume. But what that mix looks like over time, it can shift as a business enters maturity, but also where they kind of are within their competitive space. Are there high growth competitors that are entering the market that could shift to a strategy and approach for kind of an established brand as well.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a little bit too, if I may. Emily's absolutely right. Like, could I do this approach when we're an enterprise company? No. You know what I mean? And so I think absolutely right. This might work in small batches at larger companies, or as a strategy for smaller, startups like me. But yeah, you're going to get to a point where, like, what am I going to be connected with 30,000 people on LinkedIn? Probably not. Probably not. So.
That's great. I think that's a great comment there. Although I think many of us aspire on this call today to have 30,000 connections on LinkedIn. Perhaps that resonates with some of you. So 2 more questions in this rapid fire segment. And the next one is, should in an account-based strategy or tactic, should marketing own sales development? And you're ready with your answers in 3, 2, 1. Ooh, I love this. All right, Emily, why don't you take this one first?
Sure. And I guess the perspective that comes to mind for me is enterprise, right? I think that as you look at everything that goes into having a strong marketing program, there's deep ad tech, MarTech integration. And there's a strategic element as well. So to do marketing well, I think that marketers and advertisers should focus there, and focus on kind of the relationship, the handoff points with sales and sales enablement, but have that live, ultimately separately, as a sales organization, sales expertise, sales processes.
Fantastic. What would you add, Jason?
I'd say that my response comes more from personal pain than it does from like how I really feel. Although, so I like to have SDRs in marketing. Maybe I have a control issue. Maybe I have a little bit of a control issue. And maybe it's because I want to have more control over how my product gets described to, demoed to, how my prospects get outbounded to. I take my list building really personally and seriously. And so I think it's that, but also I see it as marketing's job to fully warm up a lead, almost to the point where they've got like 2 options in front of them and they're trying to make a decision, and so in that case, I see the SDR's role as a marketing job, because oftentimes most companies that have big SDR teams at all, their marketing motion is, I'm going to serve top of funnel content. I'm going to get an email address. Again, not a lead. I'm going to get an email address from that. And then I'm going to have SDRs, I hate to say this, do my job as a marketer and carry them through the next stages that they need to get carried through, to become a buyer. I see that as marketing's responsibility, not sales. And so because I see it that way, I think the SDR team should be in marketing. And also I've seen, I've tried my hand at sales, not as a career, but just trying it out. I'm not good at it, so I want to give literally everything away. So I've been on calls, here, and I'm like, oh, you want that? Yep, no problem. Yes. Oh, we're going to lose money on this deal. No problem. That's like the marketer's approach. Sales, there are like the good, experienced AEs. There is something to it. You know what I mean? There's reason why some salespeople are making millions of dollars a year. It is a hard job, and it's not something that I want to do. So I want to reserve that stuff, that metal. I want to reserve that for where it's needed, not to just carry somebody, through a path to determine if we're the right product for them or not. So that's kind of my thinking.
Well,
probably more a control freak problem than anything else.
I don't know about control freak, but you're certainly walking you're walking the talk. And I saw from you on LinkedIn this week that you were going through BD exercises just to see what that experience was for them. And so I have to applaud you. That is really going the 9th mile or 12th mile to really make sure that you're thinking through that process all the way. So kudos to you for that. I really enjoyed it, that post.
How can I give them a hard time if I don't know what it's really like?
Well, we agree. It's all about the empathy. Yeah. And not only do we have customers we serve, our sales teams are our customers to some degree as well. And so to be in their shoes, highly applaud that effort right there. So we are on our last rapid fire question. So here it comes. Can SMBs truly be successful with account-based marketing? With your answers ready, we'll reveal in 3, 2, 1. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love the tight alignment here. Emily, could you take your kind of thoughts or thought process here on this one?
Sure. So answering the question as, can small, medium-sized businesses successfully employ ABM strategies and tactics? Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And that's where the data and precision and the technology that we have at our disposal as advertisers comes into play, right? We can understand how we need to build an account list and message to that account list differently than we would for an enterprise business. So I think the tools and the tech has evolved to a point where we can do that successfully. We've seen campaigns run successfully at positive ROI, and we're able to do that, efficiently at relative scale.
Fantastic. All right, we are drawing to the close of this segment, and we've got one more question before we open it up to the Q&A from the audience. So for those of you on the line and have questions for myself, for Jason, for Emily, please submit them now. We'd like to make sure that we're curating those top questions from you folks. So in these last couple minutes before we do the Q&A, ahead of this session, we asked Emily and Jason to kind of think through a real-time scenario for getting started with account-based marketing. And that is, if you had $10,000 today to start your ABM campaigns, what is it that you would do, and what are those key considerations? But because we're short on time, we're going to limit each of your responses to about 1 minute, if that is okay. And as you're thinking through responses that Emily and Jason have for you today, I want to let you know that we have a brand new guide, and that link should be showing up on the screen just in a minute here. It's our ABM framework. So for those of you who want to get started with account-based marketing, I recommend you download this in addition to some of the talking points that Jason and Emily have for you today. Jason, would you mind taking this one first? 30 seconds on the clock. 10K in your bank account. What are we doing?
Well, I opt out because I can't do anything in 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so here's what I would do. I would laser focus on the list that I use first. So, right, because I need every dollar I spend to work for me. So I have no extra money to spend on things that aren't going to get in front of people that are getting close to or have a reason to buy. I actually may spend some of that $10,000 on data sources to really tighten that list up. So I might buy some intent data with that. I might, there are things like, there's technologies out there where you don't have to buy a year worth of stuff. You can buy it in chunks, you know what I mean? And just kind of use that to help build your list. So that's where I would start. I'd spend most of the remaining budget on just highly targeted digital, so paid social. I'd also do some direct mail with that too, to try and get some meetings out of that. And then I would pair all of this with amazing outbound and outreach. So very personalized. I would use video that they can recognize. So yeah, that's how I would start.
What is the direct mail item that you would send just as a fast follow?
Probably something alcohol related.
Fair. 'Tis the season. All right, Emily, at you. Just 30 seconds and 10K. How would you get started with your account-based marketing?
Sure. So I think about this in a very structured way, maybe unsurprising, kind of brief-like in thinking, if you will. But ultimately, always starting with what's the goal, right? Is it reach and awareness against an account list? Is it understanding, trends within that account? Or are we looking for a demand gen to drive lead volume and pipeline? That will dictate all of the decision making, kind of there on out. The channels that we use, the ad formats that we select, if we need to pull in third party data, et cetera. So the next question would be, do you already have an account list? And has that already been refined to a degree that we want to match that objective? So yes, great. Again, no, also great. We can help with that. And then the final piece being, what does that list look like in its final form, right? What's the size of the list and how does that match up with the budget that we have? If the list is sizable, then maybe we go with 1 or 2 platforms so that we've got some flexibility to see what's performing, where we're seeing response, and we can optimize in real time against that. If the answer is no, we have a relatively small list that we're going to have to really get in and try to scale over the course of the campaign. Put it all in one area and let the machine learning help as much as we can. And typically, I would say we do select social platform just because of the variety of ad format available, the ease and tech integration of getting a list included, and direct integration then with sales platforms as well to route anything if we're doing lead gen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. So we have just, I think, 7 minutes left on the broadcast today. So we're going to hit on those very top questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to address all of those questions, but we'll look forward to producing a blog post in the future that addresses some of those questions coming through the queue. So continue to submit them even if we can't get them to you today. One of the things that we didn't touch on pretty deeply here, and I'd love to circle back on, is measurement. How are you measuring your programs today? And for the essence of time, perhaps we can keep your answers to about 20 to 30 seconds. Emily, let's start with you.
You have to be able to connect your sales data, your CRM data to your marketing investment. That is table stakes at this point. I feel like those that are kind of leading in the space are starting to do that in an automated, arguably real-time way for faster decision making. So if you haven't figured out kind of within your tech stack and partner selection how to get your CRM and sales data linked up to marketing ad exposure, that would be step 1.
Fantastic. Jason, how would you differ, or what would you add?
I'd say same thing. I'd say, you have to be able to measure revenue, right? And your impact on revenue. So that's number 1. But that said, if you're just starting an ABM program or in the middle of one, it's going to take 2 to 3 sales cycles of yours to really start to see that ROI in terms of revenue. So you need to have lead up metrics as well. And that's where, your normal standard things like number of leads, but leads again need to be from your target account list, number of leads that fit, MQL and, all those other metrics to kind of lead up so that, things are at least trending in the right direction, but revenue.
So I also heard another acronym there. Would you outline what MQL means?
Oh, yes. Marketing qualified leads. So this is however your marketing and sales, hopefully combined teams, have decided that an email address or a person is ready for sales or further follow-up. They're not just like, when they first come in, it's just like a lead or an email address, I like to call it. And then as they do other things, or once they've met certain criteria about like their demographics, like they're a VP of marketing at a company that's on your target account list, boom, they're automatically an MQL, for example. Or they're not, but they've done 3 page views, they've downloaded, a white paper, and they're in the United States or something. You know what I mean? And that, behaviorally, you can define it too.
The next question actually is very near and dear to my heart as well, because this has come up in many organizations that I've served in the past. Do all B2B organizations need to be doing account-based marketing? I'm sure that if you're not doing it today, at least it comes up as a regular question. And I'd love to have Jason have the first at bat with this one, but also want to hear Emily's thoughts.
Yeah, I think the answer is no. Like, not every B2B organization has to do ABM. And there's a couple of things to consider when you're thinking about it. So the first thing is, what's your average contract value? How much is somebody spending to acquire your service, platform, whatever? The higher it is, the more you're going to need ABM, right? Because the more you're going to need to focus on, because you're going to need to take them through these experiences to get them to the point where they're ready to buy or even understand what you do. So I use a rough number of like $50,000. So if your the acronym's out, if your average contract value for a year is less than $50,000, I think you can get away with not doing ABM at all. You can just get by with doing demand generation using some light intent and just some good messaging and good advertising. In fact, that's kind of what I'm doing right now, to be completely honest.
Great. And Emily, how do you advise clients on this question?
I would agree that you don't have to leverage ABM. We see it as a form of personalizing advertising investment. So in most cases, there's a role for it, but not necessary, right? There are a lot of other data signals that we can use to hone in our targeting, where we're still able to have a personalized experience with brand messaging. So I would say not mandatory, but exactly what Jason said, highly recommended for clients and businesses that are operating under a certain size and scale.
Fantastic. This next question comes from Steve. So Steve, thanks for submitting your question. And it's around tips for working with sales on account-based marketing. Again, we are limited in time, so maybe you both could share your top tip or the thing that's made the most difference in your relationship with sales. Emily, would you start with this one?
Sure. I think making sure that there's an information flow is number one. So if there isn't any level of visibility, if the sales team doesn't have visibility into what marketing's doing, making sure to create some information flow there around insights, engagement from different accounts, or even just what activity from a marketing standpoint is live and in market. Number one. The other thing that depending on how an organization is structured, that we've seen be helpful is to do voice of sales sessions, right? So get the folks responsible for making marketing and advertising decisions in the room with sales stakeholders to understand, what it's like when a lead comes in from their standpoint. What information are they getting? How are they able to tailor the way that they do outreach and nurture? And is there anything that marketing can do to help support that in a better way? We've seen that to be, pretty effective in just getting that conversation going.
Great. Thanks to you for that question. Hopefully you got some insight here. Jason, anything to add? What's your tip?
Yeah, I think it goes back to something I mentioned earlier. It's all about the empathy. So I get right down and dirty with it. It's like, if I don't understand their experience, and if I, as a salesperson, would be, because I understand, I've been a part of, unfortunately, some of the BS that us marketers will send to sales. I've actually been a part of that. It's like, well, no, they downloaded a white paper. Why couldn't you close them immediately? And it's just like, if I was on the other end, if I was on the receiving end of that, and in my mind, I really thought you as a marketer could do a better job of warming that person up, I'm going to get resentful immediately, because I'm like, well, why am I getting this lead? And then I've got my quota and my metrics that I'm being judged by, and marketing's making it hard. So it's like, really empathy, and then be real with yourself as a marketer. Like, if you're on the other side of that, having to close the deal, is that the kind of lead that you would want? Is that the kind, you know what I mean? And the more you do that, and more that you have those conversations with sales, they realize, like, okay, we're here to support sales. Really, sales isn't here to support marketing. Like, we are here to support sales. I feel that in my being, in my position. And so, and I think approaching it that way too, but I think it's the cognitive dissonance. Get that out of your mind. Too many of us marketers are talking ourselves into bad programs, bad leads, et cetera, because we don't know what else to do. So put yourself on the other side of that fence, or that phone. Would you want that lead?
Fantastic. So we have 1 minute left here. So is there any final thought that I would ask you to leave our audience with today? Emily, I'd like to start with you on this one.
ABM works. If you're not doing it or you haven't explored it, check it out.
Short and sweet. I love it. Jason, anything to add?
I think just like anything else, good process means stepping into it lightly, right? So don't just all of a sudden just change your complete strategy thinking that it's going to save the company. ABM is not a company saver. It's a program strategy tactic. It's something to try. It's tried and true, though. So that's why you should absolutely consider it if you're not doing it yet. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for joining our session today with Live with Marketers. It was such a joy to have a conversation with you both. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just to close us out, I want to thank you, our audience, for attending in this season of gratitude and thanks with Diwali and Thanksgiving coming up. We are especially appreciated that you were able to take time out of your day to enjoy this account-based conversation. What I would say is that if you're looking to get started, I mentioned a resource earlier that I would highly encourage you to use. The URL is going to be below in the bottom third in just 1 minute here, which is ABM Frameworks. So it's a great way to get started. So highly encourage you to check that out. Additionally, now that we've come to the end of the session, one final reminder that we would love to receive feedback from you. Any feedback that you submit to us will be leveraged to make the next and future Live with Marketers sessions even better than the one today. And finally, just thanks so much for joining. Our final Live with Marketers session will be on December 15th, and that will be a year in review. So we'll be talking about some of the exciting things that happened in marketing in 2020, and there were many, so I'm excited to hear that. And we'll be discussing some of those future trends that we expect to see in the following year. And still, if that's time for you to accumulate that information for your budgeting, I think you will find it wildly helpful. And so with that, signing off from Oakland, California, thanks so much for allowing me to be your host for today's conversation. Be well.